I still remember the sound, that sharp click-click of the lock turning from the outside. At first, I thought I imagined it. I hurried to the door, called out his name. "Daniel?" But the knob refused to budge. Silence answered me. Then, faint and distant, the growl of an engine. My son's car, pulling away from the driveway, leaving me trapped. I pressed my palm against the wooden door, my breath trembling. "Daniel, why?" The words broke inside me like glass. Before I go further into this storm of betrayal, let me pause for a moment. If you are new here, welcome. Before we dive deeper into today's story of sacrifice, betrayal, and tables turned, please take a second to subscribe to Silent Tear Stories and ring the bell. Here, you'll always find stories that echo the hidden corners of family life, the ones where love is tested, sacrifices are forgotten, and justice finds its way back in unexpected turns. Tell me, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below, because sometimes your own story might be closer to what you're about to hear than you think. I still hear that sound. Click, click, the lock turning from the outside. I ran to the door and the knob wouldn't move. For a second I thought I'd imagine it. Then the distant rumble of an engine, my son's car driving away, leaving me here, locked in my own house. If you're new to Silent Tear Stories, please subscribe and ring the bell now. Here we tell the stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the moments when tables turn. Where are you watching from today? Leave a comment. I read them. My name is Margaret. I'm 62. I raised Daniel alone after my husband died. I worked nights, scrubbed floors, even sold the small field my parents left. Everything so he could have a future. That's all you need to know right now. I gave him everything. I grabbed my phone. No bars. Then I noticed Daniel had put it on silent and shoved it under the couch. Not an accident, a choice. My palms went numb. At the window, the chain gleamed. A heavy iron loop bolted from the outside. I pressed my face to the glass and the house felt suddenly foreign. The frames, the photographs of his childhood, all turned into proof of a life he was trying to erase. The iPad lit up with a single notification. My thumb trembled when I tapped it. "Daniel and Clara, wedding live stream starts now." The words hit like a dagger. On the screen he stood in a suit I never could have afforded. Clara's white veil, a room of strangers, champagne raised. And me? I watched them cheer while I bled from the window. The blood on my knuckles a small, ugly punctuation to a life they'd decided was inconvenient. Images ran through my head, him texting under the table, the time he told me to stay in my room when Clara visited. But there was no time for every memory. One thing was sharp and immediate. A banking notification I'd missed earlier. An automatic withdrawal labeled Wedding Planner paid with Margaret L. I pressed my palm to the screen and whispered, "No, you wouldn't do this to me." But he had. If your own child erased you, locked you up, and told the world you were gone, what would you do? You clicked the title because you wanted to know, how do you find your son's wedding live while he's locked you in your own house? That question isn't just clickbait. It's the question that filled my lungs that night, and it's the same one I want you to feel with me now. The house closed in like a drawer. Every familiar object leaned away from me. The sofa's threadbare arm, the picture frames, the cross-stitch sampler on the wall that once read like a promise. Do small things with great love. Now that same sampler felt like an accusation. The live stream's muffled music pulsed through the walls like someone banging a distant drum. I pressed my palm to the wood of the door until the grain bit into my skin, and the pain was the only proof that I was still very much alive. I wrapped my bleeding hand in a dish towel and breathed slow. Panic would make the chain feel heavier. Clarity might find the loose screw. So I did what I always did when the world narrowed. I looked for paper and numbers. The little ledger on the desk had been my map for 30 years. Groceries, gas, a column for birthday presents. My thumb found the page where recent entries clustered and then stopped as if they'd been waiting for me to notice. There it was, a neat line item, sterile and white against the ledger's warm paper. Planner fee, $3,200. Paid with Margaret L., my name typed into someone else's ledger like shop window glass. I sat down hard. The room tilted. A television laugh leaked through the door, and on my iPad, Daniel blinked in a suit, his smile too bright for a man who'd stolen from his mother. I remember the moment, sharp, awful, the way my hands remembered the sound of his voice when he told me not to worry. Budget stuff, Mom. Nothing you need to worry about. How many times had I believed that? How many nights had I told myself to trust my child? Those words had been a promise and a slow-acting poison. The house felt quieter when I whispered them aloud. Nothing you need to worry about. They turned into a question I could no longer dodge. What else had he hidden? I opened drawers I hadn't opened in months. Under a stack of unpaid bills, I found an envelope. Heavy, ivory, the kind of card you don't send unless you mean forever. Daniel and Clara request the honor of your presence. The embossing caught my fingertip like a grin. The RSVP date was weeks gone. The card had never been mailed. It had been tucked away, pressed flat as if someone wanted the world to forget I existed. A voicemail played in my head. Clara's clipped voice, a polite poison. Just make sure she's not there, Danny. My family doesn't need that. That ellipsis was a blade. That, not a person, but an embarrassment to be hidden. Can you feel how small that makes a mother? How it reduces everything you've been to an inconvenient stain on a new dress? I pulled my phone out from under the couch cushion where he'd shoved it. No bars. A single ghost of signal like a lighthouse far out at sea. I tried Eleanor, the neighbor with the silver bun and a heart the size of a church, but the call died before the ring. The phone's camera rolled through old photos instead, and for a moment the images were balm. Daniel at 12 with cake on his chin, my smile cut into the porch light. Then I found a recent file, proof 1 for print.jpg, a proof. My breath hitched when I saw the watermark and the date. A studio had taken this picture the same week my savings were drained. I zoomed until the pixels blurred, and there, behind Daniel's shoulder in the studio shot, was my paperback on property law, the one John and I used when we argued with banks. Its cracked spine, the chapter marked Transfers and Deeds, Signatures and Witnesses. Who brings a property law book to a wedding photo shoot? Who would stage a photograph with the very chapter that proves ownership? Something moved under my skin. Theft leaves shadows. Sometimes those shadows point like a finger. I went to the closet and lifted the tin box that used to hold biscuits and Christmas ribbons. Inside were the things you keep because they are you. John's old wristwatch, our marriage license yellowing at the edges, the deed to our home tucked into a plastic sleeve. I slid it out slowly, feeling the paper's cold authority under my fingers. The original bore my handwriting, looped, patient, John's firm and generous beside it. Beneath the original, I found a stack of photocopies, bright and new, each one bearing my name, Margaret L. But the ink looked like someone had tried to imitate me. The loops were wrong. The M had an unfamiliar sharpness, like someone wearing my handwriting for a masquerade. My mouth went dry. There was a notary's stamp, recent, an address in the strip mall where the tax office and the shipping store sat, the place where signatures were cheap and people didn't ask questions. For the first time, the pieces of the night aligned into a pattern. Money moved, papers changed hands, and my face was erased from the civil record of my own life. I could have flung the papers across the room and howled. Instead, I steadied myself and made coffee I didn't drink. I pressed play on the live stream. The officiant's voice rose as if blessing a theft. "We welcome this new family." The guests cheered and clinked glasses. I watched the man I'd raised and felt a new kind of loss. the one where you lose not just a child, but the child's soul. But I also felt something else, a gathering of will. If he thought he could turn me into a ghost, he had underestimated how stubborn a living thing can be. Memories that once softened into nostalgia were now weapons, dates, receipts, the stupid little habit of keeping everything. The ledger, the envelope, the studio proof, the notary stamp, each a breadcrumb, leading back to the place where truth could still be proved. I got down on my knees and scrabbled beneath the desk where I kept the old toolbox. Daniel had fixed a loose hinge for me last summer. He'd left a hex key in the drawer. I held the cold metal and felt the taste of possibility. Tools are small, absurdly practical things. A hex key, a phone, an old tin box. But that night, they felt like props in a play I had been too tired to rehearse for. I tested the hex against the chain's bolt. It fit with an uneasy click. My hands shook as if from cold, but they were steady enough. I stopped to listen. Fireworks cracked in the sky across town, celebratory noise that somehow tasted like salt in my mouth. On the screen, Clara lifted a veil. Daniel laughed. The aisle awaited a forever that had tried to write me out. Not yet, I whispered to the chain and to the picture on the screen. Not tonight. I tucked the photocopies and the deed back into the leather folder I'd found under a false bottom in the tin box, a corner habit of a woman who'd once lived through scarcity and learned to hide what mattered. The folder's twine rasped against my fingers. On its cover, John had scribbled, years ago, for M, if needed. I had never needed it, until now. I had to decide, would I burst through the door like a woman possessed, or would I gather proof and make the world look? The answer hammered like a second heart beneath my ribs. Evidence was the language the law and the public understood. Rage was private. I folded the papers, slid the flash drive into my pocket, and listened to the wedding's laughter swell. Then, 3 steady knocks at the back door. My hand froze on the leather folder. The knock was ordinary, but in that house, ordinary had become urgent. A woman's voice followed, thin with worry. "Margaret? It's Eleanor. Are you in there?" For a second, I did not know whether the sound was salvation or a threat. I could feel the world pivoting on that thin sound, and in that breath, the story bent toward its next turn. When the door opens, will I rush the wedding, or will I take the proof with me? And if I take it, what will I show first? The knock came again. 3 sharp raps that cut through the silence. For a heartbeat, I thought it was just memory playing cruel tricks, the echo of 100 neighborly visits long gone. But then a voice followed, urgent, ragged. "Margaret? It's Eleanor. Are you in there?" My lungs clenched. Eleanor, 65, hair-pinned in that silver bun she wore like a crown, eyes that noticed what most people ignored. She was the kind of neighbor who showed up with rhubarb pie or a story about the pastor's latest sermon. She must have heard my fists slamming the window hours earlier. I pressed my lips to the door crack. My voice rasped. "Eleanor!" "I'm locked in. Daniel, he..." The words stopped short. How could I finish that sentence? How could I confess that my only son had imprisoned me like a criminal? Her keys jingled. "Lord help us," she muttered. "I'll call the police." "No." The word hissed out, sharp and desperate. "Not yet. Please, just stay close." Why did I stop her? Pride, maybe. Fear, maybe. But I think the truth was darker. I needed to face him myself. If the world saw me dragged out of my own house by police, they'd say I was mad, bitter, exaggerating. Number. I wanted Daniel to see my face when his lies collapsed. Eleanor's voice softened. "I'll stay. Just call if you need me." Her footsteps retreated, and I was alone again, with the leather folder John had left behind. The paper inside was thin, edges frayed where tears, or time, had worn it down. John's handwriting sprawled across the page, not graceful, but steady. Em, if something ever happens to the trust between you and Danny, look here. I know you. You'll forgive and forgive until one day forgiveness won't hold. These papers, they're to keep you safe." My throat burned. John had died when Daniel was 17, before he'd even kissed his first girl, before ambition turned his smile into steel. How had John known? Beneath the note, photocopies of the deed, a bold line, "Durable power of attorney, revoked." Signed by both of us, dated years ago. John had been protecting me even from beyond the grave. And at the bottom, a flash drive, small, black, humming with secrets. I clutched the folder just as the live stream swelled again. The officiant's voice rose solemn. "Do you, Daniel, take Clara?" My son's face glowed across the screen, radiant with pride. Lies can shine as bright as truth, but only for a while. "I do," he said. Applause thundered. And something inside me broke, not into despair, but into clarity. I unpaused the audio. Clara's father raised a glass, his voice slick with old money. We welcomed Daniel into our family. A man of ambition, a man of promise, a man of loyalty. Loyalty. To them, not to me. I imagined the clinking glasses, the polished laughter, strangers nodding as though they knew him. They didn't know this. Years of double shifts I worked, or the heirloom ring I pawned to pay his tuition. They didn't hear me coughing blood into napkins after scrubbing floors through the night, because Daniel had erased me. He had scrubbed my story clean from his. But stories don't die. They sharpen. They wait. I spread the forged deed against John's old copy. My pulse steadied. The signatures didn't match. The M in Margaret wore heels I'd never learned to walk in. And there, at the bottom, Clara's looping letters, the witness signature. The betrayal wasn't his alone. She had signed her name to my erasure. The rage that came wasn't the kind that makes you scream. It was colder, heavier, the kind you build walls out of. "You locked me in, Daniel," I whispered to the page, "but truth doesn't stay locked." Eleanor's voice drifted through the door again. "Margaret, do you want me to get my brother's bolt cutter? He's got one in the truck." "Not yet," I whispered back. "Stay nearby. I might need you soon." A pause. Then softly, "Whatever's happening, it isn't your shame. It's his." Her words cracked something in me. Isn't it strange? Sometimes one sentence can remind you that you are not invisible. The iPad buzzed again. Comments scrolled faster than I could read. Such a perfect couple. Clara looks radiant. Where's the groom's mother? Then one line froze me. He told us she passed away years ago. The tablet slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor. My knees buckled. He hadn't just locked me away. He had killed me in their eyes, buried me alive. I pressed both palms against my face, but no silence could muffle that kind of violence. I looked up at the ceiling where the water stain shaped like a crooked heart stared back at me. My voice shook the air. If you've ever been silenced, if you've ever been told you don't exist, hear me now. You are still here. I wasn't speaking only to myself. I was speaking to every woman erased by the ones they raised. But I wouldn't stay erased. Not tonight. I tightened the twine around John's folder and slipped it under my blouse. My fingers gripped the hex key again, twisting at the chain until my knuckles burned. The screw resisted, then gave. A gap opened, the air rushing in sharp with rust and night. Behind me, the live stream climaxed. Clara lifted her veil. Daniel bent to kiss her. The hall erupted in applause. And I swore. By every hour I'd worked, every meal I'd gone without, every sleepless night I had prayed for him, that before this night ended, the world would know who Daniel truly was. Eleanor knocked again, gentler this time. "Margaret, are you holding on?" "Yes," I whispered. Then louder, firmer, I will not be silent anymore. I pressed my hand to the crack in the door as if she could feel it through the wood. Maybe she did because she answered steady. Good. Silence never saved anyone. I returned to the window, hands slick with sweat. One last screw, one last twist. The chain clattered loose. Cold air poured in. For the first time in hours, I breathed like a free woman. The world outside smelled of gasoline and cut grass, fireworks faint in the distance. I swung one leg, then the other, over the sill. My dress caught, tore slightly, but I didn't stop. I landed barefoot in the dirt, the earth steady under me. The iPad still glowed on the floor inside. Daniel frozen mid-toast, shouting to his guests, "To a new beginning!" I stepped deeper into the shadows of my backyard, clutching the folder to my chest. My beginning had started too. For decades, that house had sheltered me. Tonight, it had become a prison. Daniel thought his chains could keep me quiet. He thought lies could bury me, but I was free. And freedom carries a weapon sharper than rage, truth. As the night stretched wide and dark, I knew I would not storm the wedding, begging for scraps of affection. I would walk in carrying evidence, carrying my name, carrying the strength they thought I'd lost. If you were me, if your own blood declared you dead while pocketing your life, would you stay silent? Or would you rise and speak, even if your voice trembled? I already knew my answer. The gravel bit into my bare feet as I crossed the yard. Eleanor hurried to my side, eyes wide when she saw the blood on my knuckles. "Good Lord, Margaret, what has he done?" "Later," I whispered, clutching John's folder. "Right now, I need to get to that wedding." She didn't ask questions. That's the thing about true neighbors. Sometimes silence is the greatest gift. She fetched her brother's old truck, paint peeling, engine coughing. I climbed in, clutching the leather folder to my chest like scripture. The drive blurred, streetlights smeared into halos, the road humming beneath bald tires. Every heartbeat brought me closer to the hall where my son celebrated my erasure. The venue rose like a palace. White columns, fairy lights strung across the entrance, cars lined in neat rows. I could hear music before we even parked. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anticipation. Inside, laughter echoed. Crystal glasses clinked. I pushed the doors open. Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned. There I stood, dress wrinkled, hair wild, blood seeping through a dish towel wrapped around my palm. My silhouette was caught by the glow of chandeliers, but my eyes burned brighter than any light. Daniel's voice cracked mid-vow. Clara froze, her veil slipping. The officiant stammered. "Ma'am, this is my son's wedding," I said, my voice cutting through the hall like a bell, "and I am not dead." I stepped forward, every footfall loud against the marble aisle. Gasps followed like a tide. Phones lifted, recording. Livestream cameras pivoted. Millions of unseen eyes widened. "You locked me in my own home," I said, holding Daniel's gaze. "You chained my windows. You stole my money, and then—" I raised the forged deed. "You tried to erase me." The crowd erupted. Whispers hissed. Clara's parents stiffened in their seats. Daniel's face drained of color. "Mom, stop." "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand," I said. "I understand you forged my signature to steal the house your father and I built. I understand you drained my savings to pay for this circus. And I understand you told these people I was dead." The hall fell silent, every breath suspended. Clara stepped forward, her voice brittle. "She's confused." "Everyone can see that." "Confused?" I snapped. I pulled John's folder from my blouse and let the pages spill like white fire across the floor. "This is the truth." Signed, dated, witnessed. Your perfect man forged his own mother's name. Gasps turned into shouts. Phones zoomed in. One guest muttered, "Forgery's a felony." Another hissed, "Monster!" Clara's face blanched, her composure cracking. Daniel reached for her hand. She recoiled. "Daniel," I said, voice steady, "I carried you for 9 months. I carried you through 17 years of widowhood. I carried you with every paycheck I broke my body to earn. But I will not carry your lies," he stammered. I did it for us, for a future. You don't belong in this world, Mom. You'd only embarrass me." The words hit harder than chains, yet they also freed me. Because in that moment, I saw him clearly, not the boy I raised, but the man he chose to be. I turned to the guests. "You want to know who he is? He is the man who locked his mother in a cage on his wedding day." The hall erupted in outrage. Someone shouted, "He locked her in!" Another voice, "Call the police!" Daniel reached out, desperate. "Mom, wait!" But I pulled back. "No, you wait, for the law, for the truth, for the weight of every sacrifice you spat on." Eleanor, who had followed quietly behind, stepped forward now, her phone raised. "I recorded everything," she said. "The chained windows." Her voice calling for help. Every second, the room spun with whispers, phones flashing. Guests live-streamed not a wedding, but a reckoning. Daniel's knees buckled. His perfect suit sagged as if the seams could no longer hold. Clara shoved her bouquet into a chair and stormed down the aisle, her heels clattering like hammers. Her parents followed, faces like stone. My son, once my pride, now my shame, stood alone, drowning in the murmurs of disgust. I stepped onto the altar, looking down at him, not with hatred, but with a clarity sharpened by pain. "You locked me in a house, Daniel," I said, "but truth doesn't stay locked. Love doesn't stay buried, and a mother's dignity cannot be forged away." The hall roared with agreement. Strangers clapped, others jeered, some cried. The officiant set his book down with trembling hands. For the first time all night, Daniel had nothing to say. His mouth opened, closed, then froze, like a statue of betrayal caught in eternal silence. I walked back down the aisle, leaving him behind. Every step was a release, every breath a reclamation. The papers fluttered across the altar, damning him with their ink. Guests parted as I passed. Some touched my arm, whispering, "Stay strong." Others simply nodded, their eyes fierce with solidarity. The live stream cameras followed until the doors swung shut behind me, and just like that, his wedding became my justice. Outside, night air cooled my burning skin. Eleanor gripped my arm. "You did it, Margaret." The whole world saw I looked at the hall behind me, its fairy lights now pale, its music dimmed to a hollow echo. My son's laughter was gone. In its place, the sound of judgment. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. Police, lawyers, endless questions. But tonight, I was no longer erased. Tonight, I had written myself back in. If you were me, if your child had chained you in silence, then watched as you rose and shattered his lies, how would you feel? Relief? Grief? Maybe both. I only knew this. My story wasn't over, but his was no longer written in gold. When the doors closed behind me, the sound of chaos still leaked through. Raised voices, the thud of footsteps, the low growl of shame rippling across the hall. For decades, I had lived in Daniel's shadow, letting his needs eclipse mine. But tonight, for the first time, he had to stand in the shadow of my truth. Eleanor and I stood by her brother's truck. She pressed a handkerchief into my bleeding palm. "You need a doctor." I shook my head. "I need peace first." She didn't argue. That was the kind of friend Eleanor was. One who knew wounds of the heart sometimes ached louder than wounds of the flesh. The next morning, the news spread faster than wildfire. The wedding had been live-streamed to thousands. Now millions watched the replay. Clips flooded social media, my bloodied hand clutching the forged deed, Daniel frozen like a guilty child, Clara storming out. Comments poured in. How could he do that to his own mother? She raised him, and he erased her. Justice for Margaret. Daniel tried to reach me. 3 voicemails, 2 emails, even a letter slipped under my door. But I didn't open them. His words had already been said. You'd only embarrass me. That sentence had branded itself too deep to be erased. Days later, the police arrived, not for me, but for him. Forgery, fraud, unlawful confinement, words that clanged like bells of consequence. Clara's family severed ties overnight. Their mansion gates closed to him. Their lawyers would not return his calls. My house, once claimed under his name, returned to me by law. I held the deed in trembling fingers, this time stamped with official correction. Justice, at least on paper, had chosen my side. And yet, justice is never neat. It doesn't hand back the years. It doesn't heal the sting of betrayal. What it does is draw a line in the dirt. Here, and no further. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the same window he had chained. The chain itself lay coiled in the trash, like a dead snake. I traced the scars on my hands and whispered to myself, never again. I didn't mean never again would I see him. Blood is blood, threads remain however frayed. What I meant was never again would I let myself be erased. I realized something that morning. The opposite of betrayal isn't forgiveness. It's self-respect. A week later, Eleanor walked me to the courthouse. Reporters gathered like crows, microphones thrust forward. Mrs. L., what do you want to say to your son? I paused, lifting my chin. My voice was calm, steady. I want to say this. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness. If he cannot see that, then he has lost more than a mother. He has lost himself. The word spread, quoted in headlines, painted across comment threads. But they weren't crafted for the world. They were carved for me, a reminder I would carry into whatever years I had left. Clara never contacted me. I heard rumors she filed for annulment, that her family whisked her abroad. Perhaps she told her friends she had been tricked by a man without honor. Perhaps she never spoke of it again, but her absence didn't matter. Some people exit your story not with apologies, but with silence. And that silence, I learned, can be a gift. Months passed. The leaves turned, the air crisped. One evening, I walked alone to the courthouse steps where John and I had once finalized our mortgage. The sun dipped low, casting gold across the marble. I imagined him there beside me, his warm hand squeezing mine. You'll forgive and forgive, his note had said, until forgiveness won't hold. Well, John, I whispered to the fading sky, forgiveness has carried me far, but respect carries me. Now I lifted my face to the wind. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt whole. So what do we take from all this? Betrayal will come, sometimes from strangers, sometimes from the ones we love most. Sacrifice does not always earn gratitude, but dignity, your dignity, cannot be stolen. You may be silenced for a season, chained by lies, written out of someone else's version of events. But truth has a way of slipping through cracks, of loosening screws, of walking barefoot into the very room where it was denied. And when it does, the tables turn. Always. If you were me, if your own child had locked you away, declared you dead, and built a future on your erasure, what would you do? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Would you walk away? Share your truth in the comments. Because no one here is alone. Not you, not me, not any woman who has ever felt like her sacrifices vanished into shadows. Here, on Silent Tear Stories, every tale is more than entertainment. It's a reminder that we are not invisible, that respect is not inherited, but earned. That betrayal, no matter how sharp, can never extinguish the light of justice. If this story touched you, leave a comment for yourself, for the woman you used to be, or the one you are becoming. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. More stories are waiting. Stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the tables turned. Because here, we tell the truth. The final image is this: me standing outside the hall where my son's future collapsed, my hand unbandaged, scars shining in the sun. In my other hand, the old silver wedding band I had worn since girlhood. I slipped it into a half-empty champagne glass left on the steps. Love, sacrifice, loss, it all gleamed there for a moment, catching the light. Then I walked away, lighter than I had been in decades. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. You are still here.